Imagine a man who spent his nights stealing, living in darkness, far from faith. But in just one Ramadan, something happened that changed his life forever. He became a Hafiz of the Quran. How did a thief transform into a devoted servant of Allah? What made him leave behind a life of sin and embrace the Quran with his heart and soul? This is not just a story. It's proof that no one is beyond Allah's mercy. Stay with us till the end, because this incredible journey might just change the way you see Ramadan forever. Not long ago, this man was known for all the wrong reasons. He grew up in hardship, struggling to survive in a world that never seemed fair to him. With no stable job and no guidance, he turned to stealing, convincing himself that it was the only way to make a living. Faith was never a part of his life. He didn't pray, didn't fast, and saw Ramadan as just another month. While others found peace in worship, he saw religion as something distant, meant for scholars and the elderly. As the years passed, his heart hardened. He had stolen from homes, markets, and even masjids, never once feeling guilt. To him, the world was about taking what you could before someone else did. But what he didn't realize was that Allah's plan was already in motion, and this very Ramadan was about to change his life forever. It was a quiet night in Ramadan. The streets were empty, and most people were either asleep or engaged in worship. The thief had his eyes on a wealthy home, believing it to be an easy target. Under the cover of darkness, he slipped inside, expecting to find gold, money, or valuables. But as he moved through the house, he heard something that made him freeze. A voice, soft yet powerful, reciting the Quran in tahajjud prayer. The owner of the house was deep in sujud, prostration, weeping as he recited verses about repentance and Allah's mercy. Something stirred in the thief's heart. He had never heard the Quran like this before, not just words, but a message that seemed to speak directly to him. His hands, once steady in crime, began to tremble. For the first time in years, he felt ashamed. Instead of stealing, he stood there in the dark, listening, his heart pounding, his soul awakening. Overwhelmed, he turned and left without taking a single thing. But something had already been taken from him, his old self. That night, he didn't just walk away from a robbery. He walked toward a new life. That night, the thief couldn't sleep. The Quranic verses kept echoing in his mind, especially the one that struck him the most. Say, O my servants who have transgressed against themselves, do not despair of the mercy of Allah. Indeed, Allah forgives all sins. Surah Az-Zumar 39:53. For years he had believed that he was too far gone, too sinful to ever return to Allah. But these words felt different, they gave him hope. He began to wonder, could Allah really forgive someone like me? The next evening, instead of planning his next theft, he did something unthinkable. He walked into a masjid. He sat at the back, unnoticed, listening to the Imam's Ramadan lecture. The Imam spoke about how Allah's mercy is greater than any sin, and how one sincere moment of repentance could erase a lifetime of wrongdoing. Tears filled his eyes. He had spent years taking from others, but for the first time, he felt like he had been given something, a chance. That night he made wudu, ablution, and stood for prayer, his heart trembling. He didn't know all the words, but he knew one thing: he was ready to change. The next morning, as the call to Fajr prayer echoed through the streets, the thief made a decision. He would seek Allah's forgiveness. He had spent years running from faith, but now he felt an unexplainable pull toward it. He performed ghusl, full purification, put on clean clothes, and stepped into the masjid with hesitant steps. People around him were deep in prayer, unaware that a man with a past full of sins was standing among them, desperately seeking a new beginning. When he raised his hands in dua, supplication, he couldn't hold back his tears. He whispered, Ya Allah, I have wronged myself for so long, but I know your mercy is greater than my sins. Forgive me and guide me to the right path. That day, he fasted for the first time in years. It was difficult, But every hunger pang reminded him that he was no longer a thief. He was now a servant of Allah. He spent his nights in Tarawih, listening to the Quran with a heart eager to learn. And then, something incredible happened. An imam noticed his dedication and approached him with a simple question. "Brother, would you like to memorize the Quran?" The thief's heart skipped a beat. Just weeks ago, he was stealing from people's homes. Now, he was being invited to preserve the words of Allah in his heart. With trembling lips, he said, "Yes." His journey as a thief had ended, and his journey toward becoming a Hafiz had just begun. The path wasn't easy. Memorizing the Quran required discipline, patience, and a heart devoted to Allah. The man who once spent his nights stealing now spent them reciting the words of his Creator. At first, it was difficult. He struggled to pronounce the Arabic correctly and would sometimes forget the verses he had just learned. But his determination never wavered. Every time he felt frustrated, he remembered that Allah had chosen him, a man lost in sin, to carry his divine words. Day by day, his heart softened, and his connection with the Quran deepened. He woke up for tahajjud, seeking Allah's help in memorization. He spent his days in the masjid, learning from scholars and revising verses with young students. Months turned into years, and one blessed day, he stood before his teacher and completed his hifz. The same man who once broke into homes in the darkness had now filled his heart with the light of the Quran. When he recited his final verse, tears flowed, not of regret, but of gratitude. Allah's mercy had transformed a thief into a Hafiz, and now his only mission was to share this gift with others, reminding them that no soul is beyond Allah's guidance. The day he completed his hifz was the most emotional moment of his life. As he recited the final verses before his teacher, his voice trembled, not with fear but with overwhelming gratitude. The same tongue that once lied and deceived was now blessed with the words of Allah. The masjid, which had once been just a place he avoided, was now his home. People no longer saw him as a thief. They called him Hafiz Sahib with respect. But the biggest change was within himself. He no longer saw himself as a sinner, but as someone Allah had guided. He now dedicated his life to helping others who had lost their way. He taught the Quran to children, shared his story with struggling youth, and reminded everyone that Allah's mercy is greater than any sin. One night, as he stood in Tarawih leading the prayer, he reflected on his past. Tears welled up in his eyes. "Ya Allah, you took me from darkness to light. I was lost, but you guided me." His journey was proof that no matter how far someone has strayed, Allah's doors are always open. And in the month of Ramadan, the month of mercy, a thief had found his true identity, not as a criminal but as a Hafiz of the Quran. Lessons and moral of the story: no one is beyond Allah's mercy. No matter how many sins a person has committed, Allah's forgiveness is always greater. A sincere heart that turns back to Him will always find His doors open. The power of the Quran. The Quran has the ability to soften even the hardest of hearts. One verse, one moment of reflection can completely change a person's life. Ramadan is a month of transformation. This blessed month is not just about fasting. It's a chance for renewal and spiritual rebirth. It was in Ramadan that this man left his sinful past and embraced the path of Allah. The company we keep matters. Being around the right people, scholars, teachers, and righteous friends, help this man stay on the straight path. Surrounding ourselves with good company can guide us toward goodness. A small act can change a life. The thief's journey began simply by hearing the Quran. We never know what moment, what verse, or what act of kindness might inspire someone to change their life. True success lies in seeking Allah. Wealth and worldly possessions come and go, but the real treasure is faith. This man once stole for survival, but in the end, he found something far greater, the Quran in his heart. This story is a reminder that no matter how lost we feel, Allah's guidance is always near.